Welcome back to the All Sorts podcast, where we dig into the unexpected corners of history, unearthing those stories that you might not find in your typical textbook. So if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button on YouTube and follow us on X, Instagram, and Threads. Become an all-sorter and join this incredible community of curious minds. We've got a fantastic archive of deep dives already waiting for you, from ancient mysteries to modern marvels. And speaking of unexpected, you, our amazing listeners, have sent us some truly captivating material this time around.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
really fascinating stuff centered on the Vietnam War. But we're not going to retread those well-worn paths of major battles and political strategies today.
Right.
We're taking a deep dive into a facet of the war that you might not expect. We're talking about the surprisingly significant role played by rats, especially around Chu Lai.
Yeah, it might seem like an unusual entry point, but I think as we delve into these personal war tales, historical accounts, and a veteran's firsthand experience with the Rats of Chu Lai, we're going to uncover a really unique perspective on the daily lives, the challenges, frankly, the downright unsettling realities faced by the soldiers on the ground.
Exactly. And we're not just talking about the usual dangers of combat here. We're talking about another layer of discomfort, fear, even physical harm that these, well, seemingly insignificant creatures inflicted.
Right, the sources you sent paint a really vivid picture, and our mission in this deep dive is to explore just how these pervasive rodents impacted the lives and experiences of personnel in Vietnam. We'll be drawing on specific examples, specific anecdotes from those materials to illuminate this less conventional yet, as you said, crucial aspect of the war.
Okay, so to set the stage, let's start with Chu Lai. One of the War Tales excerpts that you sent over mentions Chu Lai as the headquarters for the 23rd Infantry Division.
Right. And another source points out that a Marine unit also came ashore there before moving inland to Hill 69, so clearly a significant operational hub during the war.
Definitely a key location. And from what we gather from Jim Richardson's account, rats, which you also included, for those stationed at Chu Lai, these creatures weren't just a minor annoyance. They were an inescapable fact of life.
Absolutely. Richardson was actually transferred to the rear area, expecting a bit of a respite from that constant frontline combat.
Right, makes sense.
But he found himself facing a very different, but no less challenging adversary.
Yeah, it's fascinating, right? The rear area, while offering relative safety from enemy fire, was absolutely teeming with what Richardson calls large Vietnam rats.
Large Vietnam rats.
Yeah, and he really emphasizes how these creatures thrived on the sheer volume of discarded American rations.
Yeah.
Talking everything from rotten vegetables to leftover meat. And they easily bypassed the attempts to contain the waste in these fenced-off disposal sites.
It was like an all-you-can-eat buffet for them.
Exactly. And it wasn't just the food that drew them in. Richardson also mentions those hundreds of abandoned sandbag bunkers that dotted the landscape around Chu Lai.
Right. Those bunkers became prime real estate for the rats. Cool during the day, it's secure at night, basically integrated into the very infrastructure of the base.
It's wild. They were essentially embedded into the daily lives of the soldiers. And you know what really brings that personal impact home? Charlie Hetling's anecdote. He was a Marine stationed at Hill 69. You sent that story over as well.
Oh, yeah. That one's pretty unsettling.
It's pretty vivid, right? Yeah. Imagine being completely exhausted after, who knows how long on duty, lying on your cot, trying to get a few hours of sleep, and then suddenly 2 rats are fighting on your footlocker.
Right next to your head.
Right there. He was so tired he couldn't even react at first. But then one of them runs across his face, immediately followed by the other one. That was his wake-up call.
Oh, I bet.
From that moment on, he said he literally tucked himself into his sleeping bag like a mummy, head to toe, to prevent any more unwanted encounters. I mean, can you imagine?
I can only imagine, yeah. And, for the listener, this really highlights that constant erosion of comfort and security that these soldiers experience. It wasn't just the fear of enemy fire, but that persistent discomfort, sometimes outright violation of their personal space by these creatures.
Yeah, and we're not talking about your average house mouse here. The sheer size of these rats, as described in several of your sources, is remarkable. Richardson calls them large Vietnam rats, but in the Cherries Raider blog, which you included, commenters recall rats as big as cats at Wonder Beach.
Yeah, I read that one. Big as a house cat, one guy says. Another account from Saigon, one big as a full-grown cat.
Full-grown cat, wow. It makes you wonder, right? The abundance of food, maybe a lack of natural predators within those relatively secure military zones, likely allowed them to grow to significant sizes.
And bold. Don't forget bold.
Oh, yeah, and bold. So, with this pervasive problem in Chu Lai, Jim Richardson recounts how a rather informal and spontaneous response emerged. The formation of a rat patrol. Not an official military operation, mind you.
Right, more of a grassroots movement.
Yeah, exactly. Just a group of personnel in the rear area who, out of sheer boredom and a desire to do something about this infestation, took matters into their own hands.
It's fascinating, isn't it? This ingenuity born out of necessity. Or maybe in this case, boredom mixed with a healthy dose of annoyance.
A bit of both, I'd say. And these soldiers, more accustomed to, rifles and grenades, armed themselves with whatever they could find. Metal soup plates, pans, spoons, machetes, even baseball bats.
Talk about a motley crew. I can almost picture it, this ragtag band of soldiers going on these nocturnal rat hunts.
And Richardson actually shares a pretty funny story from one of those rat patrol outings. He volunteered to go into a sandbag bunker to flush out the rats, expecting them to run toward his waiting comrades.
Makes sense, right?
Right, a classic pincer move.
Yeah.
But the rats, well, they had a different plan. They apparently felt more threatened by the others, and in a moment, he says he'll never forget, they all turned and charged directly at him.
Oh, no.
Yeah, he readily admits he's never run so fast, tripping and falling, as these rats scurried over him in their escape. It's a funny anecdote now, but at the time, well, I bet it was terrifying.
It just shows you, even those seemingly minor adversaries can be incredibly unpredictable, even formidable in their own way. And as your sources clearly show, this rat problem wasn't just a Chu Lai thing, it was widespread.
Absolutely. The Cherries Writer blog, for instance, offers a whole collection of first-hand accounts from various locations across Vietnam. These encounters were a common thread in the fabric of the war.
Right, like this one from Firebase Tomahawk. It describes a nightly battle against rats. Soldiers were constantly being woken up by rats falling from the rafters onto their cots. And what's interesting is that the reactions varied. Those guys from cities, they often panicked more than those from rural backgrounds. The country boys were more used to it, more inclined to fight back.
It makes sense. Different experiences, different responses. But it wasn't just a matter of being startled or disgusted. These rats caused actual injuries. One account from Firebase Tomahawk mentions that in a single night, 4 men had to be evacuated due to rat bites.
That's significant. For our listeners, this underscores the very real health risks associated with these infestations. We're not just talking about discomfort, we're talking about potential diseases, infections.
Absolutely. And that's what led to another unusual initiative at Firebase Tomahawk, a rat killing contest.
Now that's creative problem solving.
Right. The rules were simple. The largest rat killed each day won a prize, some beer, exemption from daily duties, things like that. But the overall winner, the soldier who bagged the biggest rat, got a 3-day R&R trip to China Beach with some spending money.
That's quite the incentive.
It was. And apparently it was incredibly effective. The account mentions that they killed almost 1,000 rats in the first week of that contest.
Wow, 1,000 rats. That really gives you a sense of the scale of the problem.
It does. And beyond these organized efforts, the Cherries Writer blog is just chock full of individual encounters that further illustrate how widespread this rat issue was. I mean, we've got stories of rats dragging off paper plates of powdered eggs, biting sleeping soldiers' toes at LZ Jane, even being drawn to the salt and webbing gear at Wonder Beach.
Leading to the, somewhat inventive use of modified soap rounds in M16s.
Soap rounds, that's a new one for me.
It's amazing the lengths they went to. And these anecdotes, they just keep coming. We read about rats being barbecued by Korean personnel, one sitting on a sleeping soldier's chest and sniffing his lips. Glowing red eyes surrounding soldiers at night, chewing through those vital wires and helicopter wiring bundles.
Even being used for target practice. I mean, it's remarkable. These seemingly small, almost mundane details really bring home those everyday realities of the war.
The realities that often go unmentioned in official accounts. The constant presence of these creatures, it undoubtedly added another layer of stress, unease to an already intensely challenging situation.
We even have accounts of rats being caught and cooked by ARVN soldiers, a Papa Son at Soc Trang who trapped and sold rats.
Who was later discovered to be a Viet Cong operative with base maps. Talk about an unexpected twist.
It's crazy. And then there's the rat causing chaos on a helicopter, a large one in a Saigon bar, even a python being used to hunt rats at a signal battalion.
I mean, they were everywhere, from those remote outposts to urban centers, even in military equipment.
Right, and then you've got those brown water sailors, the river rats, resorting to using shotguns with just the wadding to kill rats on their boats after one bit a sailor's toe.
Seems like no environment was truly immune.
Absolutely not. But, we also need to talk about the unique challenges posed by rats within the Viet Cong tunnel systems.
Oh, right. The infamous Cu Chi tunnels. Those were a whole other level of rat-infested nightmare.
As one article describes them, these tunnels were a massive network. They served as hiding spots, communication and supply routes, makeshift hospitals, even living quarters.
But life underground wasn't just about evading enemy soldiers.
Definitely not. According to the Vietnam War Travel article and the excerpt from the National Museum of the U.S. Army, those tunnels were also infected with a whole array of creatures. I mean, you name it. Ants, venomous centipedes, snakes, scorpions, spiders.
And of course, our stars of the show, rodents.
Of course. And for the tunnel rats, those incredibly brave volunteers who ventured into those dark and confined spaces, the presence of those creatures added another layer of danger. They were already navigating claustrophobic darkness, booby traps, enemy soldiers.
And then you throw in potentially disease-ridden, biting animals. Hard to even imagine.
It is. And the Warfare in Vietnam article you sent, which tells the story of tunnel rat Cherry Voisinet, he mentions being primarily warned about tripwires. But one can only imagine that added unease of knowing those tunnels were teeming with unseen creatures.
And the lack of specific training for dealing with those biological hazards just highlights how improvised this kind of warfare really was.
Yeah, it's a reminder that the Vietnam War wasn't just a conflict between human combatants. It was fought within an environment that had its own set of challenges, its own adversaries.
And the rat was a constant, unwelcome inhabitant.
Exactly. So as we wrap up this deep dive, it becomes clear that those rats weren't just a minor nuisance. They were a significant factor in the discomfort, the fear, even the physical harm experienced by so many.
Right. And these stories, while perhaps not the typical tales of heroism, offer a crucial perspective on the daily realities and the psychological impact of the war. It wasn't just about the battles. It was about enduring those constant, unsettling, often unclean aspects of the environment.
Absolutely. And for you, our listeners, it makes you think about how even those smallest, most unexpected elements can become woven into the fabric of history. They can shape the experiences of those who live through it.
They can. And with that, as we conclude this deep dive into the Rats of Chu Lai, we encourage you to keep exploring these lesser-known stories with the All Sorts podcast. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on X at AllSortsPod, connect with us on Instagram, and join the conversation on Threads.
And as always, we'd love to hear your thoughts on this episode. What other unseen forces might have silently shaped the experiences of those who served in Vietnam? It's a question worth pondering.
It is.
Thanks for joining us.
Until next time.